Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this session. Today, we'll talk about how to manage the health, performance, and efficiency of your data center using vSphere with operations management. My name is Himanshu Singh. I do product marketing for VMware's operations management portfolio. And
good morning, everybody. My name is Hisham Rad. I'm also with VMware's Management Services Business Unit. I'm in the technical marketing group. It's my pleasure to be here, and hopefully everybody's excited to hear about vSphere with operations management. Thank you.
All right, we'll get started. So, the usual disclaimer, we'll say whatever, you can't hold us accountable. That's basically the idea, all right? So today, the way we're trying to structure this is we'll start with a little bit of a background, just to set some market context, talk about the problems and opportunities that are available to IT at this point in time, and then go into talking about what is vSOM, vSphere with operations management, and what is something called vROI. And then we'll go into a lot more detail about features, benefits, and then Hisha will also cover a little bit of demos to give you a flavor of what's it like. All right. So before we get started, just want to get a quick show of hands. Who's here is aware of vSOM, what vSOM is? Oh, that's a good number. Who's aware of what vROI is? Okay, subset. So that's good. Perfect. So there's a good chunk of folks here who, will benefit from some of the quick overview stuff. All right. So if you think about how technology has been changing over time, right? Moving from mainframe to client server to the mobile cloud era, hybrid cloud, etc., to whatever's coming up next. One thing that's been constant in this change is that the expectations of the business have been rising, like in terms of what they expect IT to do. However, IT's capabilities haven't basically kept up with that, right? Again, I would love to have a show of hands of if you guys are in IT, how many of you are seeing flat IT budgets? All right, good number here. There's a privileged folks here, by the way. Lots of money in the IT flowing around. Decreasing, all right. Flat or decreasing? Here we go, all right, thank you. Okay, so it's a bit of a pain point, huh? So what we need basically is for IT to have access to some sort of a game-changing technology that helps you, basically bridge that gap, right? So this is what basically we want to talk about, and that's kind of the approach that we're taking in terms of the solution we're proposing, right? So that's basically the problem. We're trying to look at that problem in terms of an opportunity, all right? So three aspects to it. If you think about, you basically need to, as IT, as you think about, okay, how do I move from, where I am to where business is expecting me to be? There's kind of three facets to it, right? You have to start with being able to provide solutions at the speed the business operates. So that business is still working, LOB is still working with IT versus going outside, right? So you need to be able to make sure that you are delivering reliable services and applications with flexibility to meet the needs of the business. The second aspect is about moving away from just being reactive and solving problems when your customers are calling you, this is down, my applications are slow, to actually moving to proactive issue avoidance, right? So you need some sort of a solution that helps you, one, of course, solve problems faster, but also gives you some information about what might be coming up, right? So a little bit of predictive analytics that helps you make sure that the problems before it actually affects the business. And the third aspect is, it's basically that nirvana of truly becoming a strategic partner to the business, where you are not just focusing on IT's operational efficiency, but you're actually coming up with ways in which you can actually partner with the business to drive growth for the company, to drive whatever new initiatives are, and you're adding value that way. So we'll just take a little bit of a deeper dive into that. So when you talk about matching the speed of the business, the way, as IT, you have to start with is your core infrastructure. You have to start with the vSphere layer, right? Which is where you have that platform that is built for today's hybrid cloud era, the needs of that, the hybrid cloud era, right? We referred to that earlier. And then on top of that, you need to make sure that you have a consistent management and automation framework across your data center as a whole. And we'll get to that, the meaning of that, especially the word consistent here. The third aspect is, of course, from an IT perspective, you have to think about the efficiency of your resources as well as the productivity of the team itself. You don't want the IT team to be focusing solely on a bunch of manual repetitive tasks, right? Just getting kind of bogged down with that. Versus you want some sort of a solution that helps you automate those, and the IT team can actually focus a little bit more on strategic tasks. And we talked about adding value to the business. The second aspect is moving away from being reactive to proactive, right? And the way you have to think about it is, of course, you have to start with improving your performance, reducing your downtimes, and those kind of things. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you're looking at your entire stack, your entire data center as a whole, all right? And part of that is also the consistent management that I mentioned in the previous slide. And the idea there is that you need to be able to look at everything in your data center as a first-class citizen. So it's not about, for example, a VMware technology versus a non-VMware technology, or whatever vendor you're using. You need to make sure that the solutions that you have are managing your environment across. And the third aspect is about having better visibility of the dependency of applications that you're running to the underlying infrastructure. And that's really important because you have to think about, for example, infrastructure gets moved around, especially in a virtual environment scenario, right? So you want to make sure that your applications, especially tier 1 applications, are not affected. Also, if you're thinking of a disaster recovery situation, you want to make sure that you have a clear mapping of this dependency of applications to infrastructure. So you can make sure that you have better DR plans in place, or if a disaster really happens, you can actually come back up very quickly. And the third aspect is about becoming that strategic partner for the business. And the way you go there is about we talked about the moving away from the manual task, for example. So you got to automate things to improve efficiency, but at the same time, what I have there is safely automate. What does that mean? Safely automate means the tool is automating things to the extent that IT is in control. The tool is not making changes willy-nilly without you knowing what's going on, because you are the expert for your environment, right? So the tool needs to ask for permission, and IT always needs to be in control. That's really important. The second aspect is looking at your application performance and making sure that the underlying infrastructure is optimized in terms of the overall distribution of it, right? So how workloads are being placed, how workloads are being balanced in your environment, that's actually a key aspect to consider as well. And then lastly, if you are making sure that you are enforcing security hardening guidelines, best practices, if you're concerned about compliance, for example, in your environment, you've got to make sure that that's being addressed as well. So that's kind of a bit of a wish list here, right? Now let's switch over to see what customers like yourselves are telling us. Yeah, that's great, but here's what's actually happening today in your data centers. And hopefully many of you will identify with this. Can I get a quick show of hands, folks here who are in the VI admin capacity? Fair number. Storage? All right. Networking? There you go. Good mix. All right. And the one thing I noticed is that there's a few overlaps, but mostly it is different people. And that plays into the scenario we're going to talk about now, right? So you got a bunch of different technologies in your IT environment. You've got a bunch of different tools monitoring everything. All those tools are sending you a whole bunch of monitoring data. So when you have a problem that happens, you get this storm of alerts coming at you. Most of the time, the problem with these alerts is that they are symptomatic alerts. So they are actually telling you, this is 90%, this is 80%, this is up, this is down. But it doesn't tell you anything beyond that. It doesn't tell you, okay, so what actually is the underlying problem? What do I do here? How do I solve this problem? What is the root cause, right? You have to spend time with a whole bunch of teams working together, trying to figure out, but at the same time, you do not have a single source of truth. Everybody is looking at their own silos, right? You point fingers at each other. Must be the storage guy's fault, right? The storage guys always, get left behind holding the bag a bunch of times. And so you end up doing what we've learned from managing physical resources, is that if I have enough resources in my environment, I won't have a problem. So we end up over-provisioning. And that basically defeats the whole purpose of going to virtualization in the first place, because then you're not making the best use of your resources, right? So that's the cycle we got to break. Now, what I'd like to do is give you kind of a, based on, again, our conversations with customers, what are the top 3 challenges that you're facing, right? Of course, downtime and performance degradation, number 1, right? The second one, you're facing, as we saw earlier, reduced or flat IT budgets. And what that means is that you need a solution that is able to, really get the most efficient use of your resources and also enables the team to be more productive, right? So you can do more with less budget and less time. And the third one is, as we just talked about, managing things in silos, which what it does is basically increases your troubleshooting times. It takes longer to solve problems. So you need that one solution that basically, looks at everything as a whole, right, across your environment. So when you think about, all those things from a technology perspective, that's basically the VMware approach here. When you think about operational analytics overall, there's these 5 areas that we need to think about. You have to start with the performance and health management of your infrastructure, of your applications. You have to consider how best you're optimizing the capacity utilization in your environment. You have to think about making sure that configuration health, compliance, and those kind of things are really taken care of, right? You also have to make sure that when you're looking at the topology of your environment, all the analytics, you're considering everything all together, right? Not managing in silos. And the 5th one here is really important because that's something that a lot of us don't really use as much. And that's all the unstructured log data. Everything in the environment is generating a whole bunch of logs, right? And a lot of times we're not using that data to the extent that we should. There's a lot of insights in that data that can help us solve problems faster, but we don't use it. So that's another area that we need to make sure that we address. And that's basically the VMware approach. So coming to the solution here, right? That's why I'm here. I'm here to pitch you, right? So the idea behind vSphere with operations management is to give you the industry-leading virtualization platform, and then adding on top of it a consistent management and automation layer, right? So that you're able to, you're not thinking about managing your environment as an afterthought. You're thinking about, well, here's my platform, and of course I need that management component to it, and that basically forms, the whole. That's basically the new way to go to virtualization now, right? The old ways of just looking at the platform are gone. So that's what vSphere with operations management is all about. From a pure component perspective, it's vSphere plus vRealize operations standard edition. And what standard edition lets you do is manage your vSphere. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is, so we said managing everything all together. For that, what we have is something called vRealize Operations Insight, or VROI, or VROI. Pick the way you like to address it. Now, with VROI, the idea is, well, we talked about all that unstructured data coming in from your environment as well, right? So think about this, right? You've got your infrastructure layer, you've got a bunch of applications running, all that data is being generated. It's structured data, metrics, alerts, and those kind of things. This is where vRealize operations comes in, right? And it gives you the capacity, performance, health, compliance, and those kind of things on top of that. But on the other side, you've got this, tons of this unstructured data that you're generating. Your apps are generating, your infrastructure is generating, and Log Insight is the solution. vRealize Log Insight is the solution that we've brought in this case. And what it does is it basically helps you aggregate all those logs, do a bunch of querying and searches on top of that. There is machine learning there that does the analytics, and you can basically do a lot of troubleshooting much faster because of these two. And of course, they kind of they work really well together. As an example, you could do a launch in context bidirectionally. So let's say you're in vRealize operations, you're looking at the console, and we'll see that a little later. But you're trying to troubleshoot, you have an alert. Let's say you go down to a particular object. right from there, you can launch Log Insight in context, look at all the logs for that object, and quickly search and find that needle in the haystack, exactly what went wrong, right? On the other hand, let's say you're in Log Insight, you're looking at some trends, some log data that's coming in with real-time monitoring and those kind of things, and you're like, oh, actually, I want to set up some of these alerts, and I want to make sure that every time I get this alert, it gets sent to vRealize operations. That happens as well. And so then vRealize operations is still that single place for you where you're going to be looking at that dashboard that takes in all these data points from your infrastructure, from Log Insight, using structured and unstructured data together to really look at everything in your environment across components of technology as well as the types of data, so you can do faster troubleshooting. You can figure out, with the predictive analytics engine, with the self-learning that vRealize operations does, really figure out what's going on, what might be potentially going wrong, and how do I solve that problem? How do I avoid that problem, right? And so, from a pure component perspective, with vRealize Operations Insight is basically, it's an add-on on top of your vSOM. And so what it does is, as I said earlier, vSOM has vRealize Operations Standard Edition. With vROI, it just upgrades it to the Advanced Edition and adds on Log Insight. That's basically how it works in terms of just packaging. Now, I said managing everything in a data center. How do we do that? We enable that through these extensions. We call them management packs, we call them content packs, and essentially the idea is that, as I said before, it's not about VMware technology and other vendor technology, right? It's all about what is in your data center, being able to connect all that to the solution here, and making sure that you can manage everything as a whole. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just some examples. It's about, I think, 80 odd solutions, and we keep adding more. So you can check it out. Go to VMware Solution Exchange, get the full list there, and figure out whatever you're using in your data center, whether we have extensions available for that. Most cases, yes, we will have those, right? So all the popular ones are definitely covered. As I said, 80 plus extensions available. So that's kind of the idea, to make sure that you're able to manage everything in your data center as a first-class citizen. All right, quick overview in terms of just bringing it back together, right? So you have you have the option to go with some sort of a traditional monitoring solution. You could go with some sort of niche vendor solutions as well that do specific things. But then again, that brings the same problem of, one, not covering a variety of aspects of it, right? You may not have capacity utilization or optimization as a capability. You might still be stuck managing 5 different solutions from 5 different vendors instead of having one place to go to, that single source of truth we talked about earlier, right? You might not be able to use both structured and unstructured data together. So truly, with the combination of vSOM and vROI, we bring all that together to give you that comprehensive solution, right? Some quick numbers in terms of, there's been a bunch of different studies based on existing customers who've used it and the kind of benefits they're seeing. Of course, what I would quickly say is, there's numbers here that would benefit both if you are a practitioner, a user, you care about downtimes, you care about how quickly you can solve problems. There's some numbers about that. If you care about IT budgets, if you care about how to make sure that you are managing your whole entire team most efficiently, making the best use of your IT budgets. There's some numbers here about CapEx reduction, overall IT cost reduction. There's that last thing there about 2.4x return on investment. That's actually a 12-month figure. So customers have seen up to 2.4x return on whatever they initially invested on this, to get this operations management capability within 12 months. So significant numbers there. All right. What I'd like to do now is give you a very quick overview of what's the new stuff that we came up with in the 6.1 release recently, and then we'll switch on to a bit more of a deep dive, right? So this release, essentially, from a vSphere with operations management perspective, is all about intelligent workload management. That's a new area that we have basically gone in. We're putting a lot of resources behind this. We're making sure that we keep adding capabilities with every release. But basically, with the first release, what we have is the idea of balancing your workloads, right? Intelligent workload balancing, and think about that from a capacity perspective, making sure that you are looking at the capacity of your environment overall and whether you can balance it or not. So if you think about workloads in general, right? It's quite typical to not have all the workloads arranged in the most efficient manner possible, right? Part of it is because there's not enough guidance available about it. It's a lot of a manual effort, and it takes time, it's difficult. At the same time, it's not something that people really consider a strategic activity. So you spend a bunch of time doing, moving things around, but you don't really get the, the benefit or credit for it, for example. So we want to simplify that. And the way we do it is we give you this capacity utilization dashboard. You'll see the UI in a bit, but the idea basically is to look at your entire IT environment, whether it is at a cluster level, a host level, VM level, and see the spread of, all the way from highly underutilized to highly overutilized. And then you're trying to get to that middle green zone, which basically is more of a balanced scenario, right? And we'll definitely get into that a little bit more. And on top of that, it gives you that visual, layout, but also gives you a balancing plan. So that we tell you, okay, here's where you are, and in order to be more balanced, here's what you do. And then there's a button right there which says, oh, initiate balancing action, and voila, So that's basically the idea behind the intelligent workload management. As I said, we're going to keep adding more capabilities with every release. All right, I'm a marketing guy. I like showing pictures. Sometimes they are pretty pictures. Sometimes they are not as pretty pictures. Why the hell am I showing you this? Well, the idea here is to give you a quick analogy of, think about your data center as a library. This doesn't really look like a library, but believe me, at one time it used to be. And so the idea is you keep adding workloads, you keep adding books, you don't put them in the right places, they keep moving around, and it becomes as messy as this, right? And so what we're giving you is that librarian to put things in the right places, to make your data center as efficient as it could be, right? That's the idea. So with that, I'm going to get off the stage and get Hisham over here so you can look at what you actually came here for versus listening to the marketing guy.
Good morning, everybody. All right. Why did my laptop lose power? Okay. Good morning. We're going to get into the details of vRealize operations, vSphere with operations management. I'm going to focus more on the operations management side, so give you a lot more detail around what we're doing new in 6.1, so we'll jump right in. Himanshu, do you want to come and see why I don't have power here and why I'm disconnected now? All right, so there's a lot of new updates in the vSphere 6 platform as part of this, right? But again, for the rest of the session, what we're going to focus on is details around the operations manager piece. But from a vSphere perspective, there's a lot of great updates that we released with version 6.0. But we're going to jump into the details of the operations manager piece. So what I want to talk about, spend some time around the capacity piece, the workload balance plan. There's something going on down there. That should help, yeah.
Yeah, turning it on.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right, so then we're going to talk about some of the capacity enhancements, some of the new actions, and we're going to talk about the platform as well, because we've made significant improvements to the platform as well. So let's jump right in. So custom data center. Has anyone heard of this new construct in VROps 6.1 and Operations Manager 6.1? So there's a couple of folks, right? A couple of folks. Excellent. So this is a new construct. It's a new logical construct in VROps that allows you to group capacity provider objects. So you can actually take things like clusters, hosts, data centers, even a vCenter, and say, I want to group these together under this new object called the custom data center. And the reason why you want to do that is because we want to be able to do capacity planning, performance management, and performance analytics against all those objects. What's a good use case? I deal a lot with customers that have objects sitting in multiple vCenters, right? So here's an example. A customer has SAP clusters, one SAP cluster in vCenter 1, one SAP cluster in vCenter 2. They have to manage them individually from a capacity and performance perspective today. But now with this custom data center construct, you can say, I want to group these objects together. And because I'm grouping them together, what I'm going to do now is essentially do capacity management across that application, so I can treat it as a holistic application, leveraging this custom data center construct. We can also leverage the workload balance plan that Himanshu talked about to be able to do capacity optimization and visualize the capacity across that construct as well. So on my other machine, it's trying to reconnect here, but what I'll do is I actually want to demonstrate some of this stuff for you, so I'm just going to try to reconnect here very quickly as we're talking, and I want to get through some of the demo. So yesterday I ran out of time for the demo, but today I definitely want to make sure that we do get to the demonstration here. Himanshu, do you want to come up and just reconnect my VPN on this side? Yeah, it's trying to reconnect to A. Just try to SSL VPN A. Okay. Okay, so I'll come back and demonstrate that in just a moment. Now, one thing I'd like to point out on this is that it can actually span vCenters. So again, like I said, right, the SAP cluster here. I can take a host from this vCenter, I can take a host from here, and I can take a cluster from my other vCenter. I can take a virtual data center from here, so you can mix and match these capacity provider objects to get that full visibility. So what that means is all the badges that you're used to seeing in Operations Manager, like the performance badge, the capacity remaining, time remaining, the workload, all those badges, now we can do that across a custom data center. So have that visibility at that holistic level. So hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate that here in a moment when Himanshu tries to get me connected. Now, another thing is reserving capacity. So we already had the ability to do capacity planning and capacity modeling in Operations Manager. Now what we've done is we've actually added the ability to reserve that capacity. Before we would reserve it, but only say from a time remaining. We'd only reflect it in time remaining. But a lot of clients said to us, well, if I have a project and I know I'm doing something next month, I really would like to reserve that capacity. I'm adding a number of workloads, so I need that capacity. Let me reserve it, set it aside. So now, when you create a project and you commit that project, by default, what we will do is reserve the capacity now, as you can see down here. So when you go to the capacity remaining badge, it actually reflects that capacity that you have on reserve. So when you go and run capacity reports and everything, it actually takes into consideration the capacity reservations that you have implemented. Okay, so I'll actually hopefully come in and show that here momentarily. Now, Himanshu talked about the workload balance plan as well. Excellent, thank you very much. So Himanshu talked about the workload balance plan. This is what it looks like. So it's a new widget in Operations Manager that gives you a quick glance of what your environment looks like from a capacity optimization perspective. So you can see here, on the left-hand side, everything is sort of in the underutilized zone. In the middle is that optimal capacity related zone. On the right-hand side is the overutilized zone. And I can visualize that at the cluster, the host, and the VMs. I can see where everything is. And so ideally here, you want to be in that middle zone. But in reality, not a lot of our environments are like that. But you want to visually be able to see it, but also take action around this. So what this is looking at is the capacity within your environment and looking at the capacity remaining and determining how well balanced are you. So let's take a look at some examples here. So here's one example. Let's take a look at some of these objects on the left and on the right. There's nothing in the middle. The only thing I have in the middle is in the bottom, which are some of the virtual machines. So I have some virtual machines that are in the optimal range from a sizing and capacity perspective. But when you look at your infrastructure, my capacity providers, my clusters, and my hosts, some are overutilized, some are underutilized. Well, why don't we balance these a little bit better to get better performance and better utilization out of our environment? Right? So this is an example of an environment that's not well balanced. So now you can actually go in and take action on this, and I'll show you how in just a moment. Okay? Here is a rebalance container action. This is a new action that was introduced in Operations Manager 6.1. So now you can actually look at those constructs, look at a cluster, you can look at a data center, you can look at a vCenter, you can look at a custom data center, that new construct I mentioned, and you can say, rebalance this container. What it will come back with is this rebalance plan. And it basically looks at all the workloads that are in those capacity providers and says, how can I better optimize and move things from here and here and bring them into that optimal zone based on the capacity that you have, based on the policy settings that you have within your environment. How can we optimize this? Right? So here you can clearly see that the previous slide we were not balanced. So this is going to come back and give you a list and say, if you move these VMs here, if you move these VMs here, and we do all this, and these VMs are higher demand, these ones are higher memory, these ones are more storage, move these things around, you get a better balanced environment. Right? This is what we're going to do from a capacity perspective. So now, one thing I'd like to say is, first of all, we have a begin action button right on the bottom here. Take action. You click on that, it goes out and balances this for you. Some customers have asked me, though, can I only select the VMs that I want to move? And so it is something we are looking to do, but right now this is an all or nothing operation. So when we give you this balance plan, when you click on begin action, we're going to move all the VMs in that list. But again, some customers said, well, hang on, what if I don't want to move all of these? Okay, so we're looking to do that. It's not there yet, but when you click on begin action, we're going to move everything. Now, the other thing I want to let you know, and I'll come to your question in just a moment, sir, because you're probably thinking about this, well, are you going to break my affinity rules? Are you going to, are you taking those into consideration? And the answer is, we're not going to break your affinity rules. We're not going to violate those. We're going to honor the affinity and anti-affinity rules. So if you have rules saying these VMs have to stay here and these VMs can't live together and these VMs have to live on these hosts, we respect and honor the affinity and anti-affinity rules. So we're not going to move things around just by guessing, right? We're going to really optimize, but respecting what you have defined in DRS affinity and anti-affinity rules. Yes, sir? Can you export it to a file so I can do a change request? So the gentleman's question is, can I export this into a file so I can generate a support request? And so the way you would export it is through the reports. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on reports, but we've enhanced reporting so that you can just take a dashboard and say, generate a report from that. And then when you generate a report, you have the ability to generate reports in different formats, a PDF or CSV. In your case, you'd probably want a CSV that you can then leverage to generate a support request or a change request. Okay? Any other questions? Good. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me, and then we'll continue on here. Okay, so here's another example. Everything I have is in the overutilized environment here. I have a lot of things that are overutilized, right? So, but when you look at the workloads, I have a lot of workloads that are in the overutilized. So now, forget about the hosts and the cluster for a moment. Look at the VMs. Again, it's giving you a quick visual indication that I got a lot of VMs that are overutilized here, which typically means they're experiencing contention. There's some sort of stress in these workloads. These workloads are a good example of workloads that could be right-sized. In this case, some of these VMs are likely undersized, and you want to essentially right-size them, meaning you want to size them up. They may need more CPU, they may need more memory, they may need more storage, whatever the case may be. Again, gives you a really good, quick visual indicator. So you can right-size VMs, but then also you can still balance the infrastructure to start to really leverage these hosts and the clusters that are on the left-hand side over here, right? Leverage those, take advantage of that capacity as well. Here's another example. This is what my environment looks like. I have a very small environment here that I'm going to demo from in a moment, and this is what mine looks like because everything is on the right-hand side. My VMs are overutilized, all my capacity providers are overutilized. What does this screen tell you? Who would like to answer that question? What does this screen tell you? Just take a guess, somebody. I'm sorry? So the gentleman's response was, you need more hosts. Absolutely. I can't balance anything here. Right? I don't have enough capacity to even move anything to that middle. right? We're out of capacity. My VMs are struggling. My hosts and my clusters are struggling. It's because I don't have enough capacity. So this is, kind of another good visual indicator that, hey, I got nothing in the underutilized and the optimal range. I'm well overutilized. So, it's likely that we need to order some more capacity. Now, the great thing is that you see this here, but Operations Manager, the alerts and the actionable alerts in Operations Manager have probably been triggering, telling you that, hey, you got host overpopulation here. Your cluster has overpopulation. Your VMs are stressed and they're experiencing stress for CPU and memory. So you're probably seeing those alerts also on the recommendation page, which I'll jump into a demo here in just a second. Right? Here's another example where, looking at the infrastructure, sure, I can optimize my infrastructure, my hosts, and my clusters. But if you look at the workloads, the majority of my workloads are here, doing nothing. These are workloads that are either powered off, idle VMs, oversized VMs, right? Again, visually, you can see this now. It gives you that quick snapshot of your environment. Now, some of you may be asking, well, I have thousands of VMs. How are they going to show up here? Right? This is only 20 VMs I got, but what happens when you got thousands of hosts or hundreds of hosts and X number of, clusters and, thousands of VMs? So just one moment, sir. What we do is we end up giving you a bar chart with the numbers, and we actually show that and visualize that for you, and you can actually hover over these objects and we give you more detail around them. Yes?
Just wondering, the visualization here, is it real time or is it based on a time span?
Yes, great question. So the gentleman's question was, is this visualization here, is it real time or is it based on a time span? And it's basically a snapshot of the last 24 hours. We update this visual every 24 hours for you. Okay, so what that means, great question by the way, thank you, because I forgot to mention this point earlier. Because this updates once a day, what that means is if you actually go ahead and say, rebalance my container, right? Wait till the next day to come back and look and see how things have updated, right? And we actually partially do that on purpose because we don't want you to do a rebalance action now and then wait 20 minutes and do a rebalance action again and wait 20 minutes, right? Because you also have things like DRS, which is doing performance balancing within the clusters, and so we want to do things methodically and do things appropriately here. So, come back, do a rebalance, come back later, at least a day, and then look at this again. Okay? Great. All right, so again, underutilized workloads. Let's reclaim some capacity. In the Ops Manager UI as well, if you went to reclaimable capacity or if you generated the reclaimable capacity reports, you probably were seeing that you have powered off and idle VMs and oversized VMs and you can reclaim capacity, right? But again, this is a good visual indicator around capacity utilization within the environment. This is the nirvana, right? This is what we want to try to get to. This is sort of that, the happy, happy life, if you will, where everything is good. You're not getting a lot of support calls. The applications are running. Your users are satisfied because they can get to everything they need. This is what you want to try to get to. And again, this helps you visualize this within your environment. Okay? All right, let's do this and then we'll jump into doing some demo around some of the things we looked at and we'll come back to slides. Okay, so another thing we added is custom profiles. So for those of you who have been leveraging Operations Manager, who have looked at it, you realize that out of the box we give you already 4 custom profiles by default. Large, small, average, medium. But a lot of customers said to us, well, we have our own profile sizes. We have our SAP VM, and this is what we size it in our environment. We have a SQL VM, and this is how we size it in our environment. This is our Nginx web server, and this is how we size it. So we want to be able to relate to capacity from a sizing that's meaningful to us as an organization. So we listened, and we came up with this new feature called Custom Profiles, which you can add your own profile sizes. Now what that means is, so you can go in, you can create your own custom profile sizes, as you see up there. This laser here doesn't seem to work on this screen, but down here, now you can visualize, in that profile. So we create a SQL Server profile, and then down here in the capacity remaining visual on that last chiclet over there tells me, oh, I can get 3 more of these SQL size VMs that I have. Okay, so again, you can visualize capacity within your profile sizes. Very powerful feature. Now, the other thing I just wanted to note here is that you can actually leverage this in projects. So when you're doing capacity simulation, capacity modeling, you can now leverage your own custom profiles in capacity modeling. So you can say, I need to add 10 Oracle VMs next week, and instead of me, just coming up with some numbers or typing in the numbers, I've already created a profile. So why don't I just use the drop down and select my Oracle VM profile? So it knows now exactly what your requirements are for an Oracle VM. So it'll basically plot that and show you what that capacity modeling simulation results are. Okay, so you see that right away. Okay, let's jump into a couple of things to demo, and we'll come back. Actually, let's just do this slide, because some of the other ones are just other enhancements that I'm not going to demo. So, move VM. Again, this is another action that we introduced here. Sure, you can move VMs in vSphere Web Client. You can move VMs in the vSphere Fat Client. Now it's here as well, because we already have a number of actions in the Operations Manager, so we just wanted to add this one as well. One of the things I just want to note about this one is that when you do a move here in Operations Manager, we are going to look at capacity. Okay, so when you say, I want to move a VM, it's going to give you a dialog box, and the dialog box says, what's the scope of the move? Are you moving this within the same cluster? Are you moving this within a virtual data center? Are you moving this within a custom data center, right, that potentially could span multiple vCenter servers? Where are you moving this object to? And then it analyzes the capacity based on what this guy is using for capacity and says, hey, let me give you a list of all the candidates of where you can move this to within that scope, but also I'm going to prioritize that list for you. So this is the best fit, this is the second best, this is the third best, so we're going to prioritize that list, and you have the ability to choose where you want to move it to. Okay? So that's another action that we added here. Again, we do respect, because a lot of our customers, pretty much most of our customers, leverage DRS and are doing, vMotions are happening based on their DRS requirements, and they have, affinity and anti-affinity rules. We will respect those as well. Okay? So let's jump into a demo, and we'll come back to some more slides. It did disconnect me because the power was off, and even though... So we'll just jump back in here. So here's a demo environment that I have. So a couple of things I'd like to show first of all. Let's talk about workload balance plan. So remember that workload balance plan, right? The visual that we saw there. So here, for example, I have some clusters, I have a data center, I have a custom data center. And remember what I said to you, right? I said, this is my environment. I have a small environment I'm demoing from here out in the cloud. And you can see it's just a handful of hosts, 2 clusters, but it's well overutilized, right? There's nothing I can do from an optimization perspective here. Really what I need to do is get more hardware into this environment. But very quickly, I can visualize that, right? So you can see that here as part of that. Now, having said that, what you're looking at here is a custom data center object. So you can see this is that new construct that I talked about. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the details of that object, right? So sure, that visual there didn't look very attractive just simply because everything for me is overutilized. But likely in your environments, it's going to be very different. You're going to have workloads scattered right across, right? But now I'm at the custom data center object, and you can see my custom data center is called custom data center all clusters. So I've taken all the clusters in my environment and added them to this custom data center. But now I can see the health, the risk, the efficiency of this custom data center. And I can see here that I have different alerts, right? And as you know, alerts in VROps, we give you actionable alerts. So when we're surfacing alerts, we're telling you some of the things that you need to, that visual just told you. So remember, I said overutilized, right? Everything is overutilized, my host, my clusters. So let's take a look at an example. So here, for example, virtual machine has high continuous, high CPU causing stress. So and it says 2 objects are impacted. So I'm going to select that alert there. And so I can see that 2 alerts, this is actually triggered on 2 different virtual machines. One of them is critical, one of them is informational at the moment. But let me click the details of this. So when I go to the details of that alert, it's going to tell me here, okay, well, this guy has CPU stress, it's at critical level, it's at 117%. And as soon as you hear the word stress in Operations Manager, that means it's chronic. That means it's been ongoing. It's not a short-term thing, okay? So this has been ongoing CPU stress. Now, the beautiful thing about these alerts is that they're actionable. So you can see right there, we have a recommendation, and in the recommendation, we have a button that says set CPU count. So here's the recommendation, add more CPU for this virtual machine. Set the CPU count right in the alert. Okay, so I can actually just go right here and say, okay, current CPU is 1. Based on the contention that this guy has had, it's recommending you change it to 3. Right, so it's giving you that recommendation right here. And by the way, if this operating system does not support hot add and requires a reboot, you simply have to check this box here that says powered off allowed. And as a precaution, maybe I would really like to snapshot this virtual machine before I actually execute this action. Right? So again, we give you those options right in the alert. Right? And then you simply say begin action. Now, one of the things that we introduced in 6.1 also is an automation framework. So we have this action framework where we have these different type of actions that we can tie them to alerts, which is what you're seeing here. But now we can automate this because you're probably thinking, okay, well, if I've set up my policies correctly and I'm comfortable with the recommendations that are coming back, why doesn't this environment do some self-healing, right? Some automation. Why, if it knows that I'm experiencing stress and this stress has been going on for a long time, why can't this happen automatically for me? Why do I need to do it? And the answer is with 6.1, you can. So once you're comfortable with this and you're seeing that, again, you've defined your policies correctly, you can actually go into your policies and say, I want to automate these alerts. So you find the alerts that have these actions, and you say, I'm comfortable with this one. Let me automate it. So when this alert triggers, you don't have to see it. You'll see that actually that alert triggered, the action took place, it resized the VM. In this case, it resized it upwards, added more capacity. And then you have a history of it in the log. So in the audit log, we have a history of this change. But the environment fixed itself without you having to do anything. Right? Yes?
In that automation plan, can you schedule when the change occurs? Because you wouldn't want to be at the reboot at any time and set a contention for a long time.
Right. So another great question. Can I schedule this action? Right? So if I actually go in and say automate this, can I schedule this action? And today, you cannot. So when the alert triggers, the action is going to take place. But a lot of customers have been asking us that question. So the answer is, it will. It's a roadmap item, so eventually we're looking to get there. It's not there in 6.1. But that is a common request, and we will address that. Okay? Yes, sir. So the gentleman's, I'll repeat his question. So the gentleman's question was, can I actually, have this, trigger something like a service catalog and update in there, right? And so the answer is, if you leverage the vRealize orchestrator, then yes, you can. Okay, so this can do it here, but if you leverage the vRealize orchestrator as well, you're familiar with orchestrator? Right, so where you can go in and actually tie a workflow to this action, then you can certainly do that. So you can actually update, you know, create a workflow that will go out and make those updates and open up a ticket for you and whatever the case may be, and you can take care of it that way. But you will have to leverage the vRealize orchestrator, which all of you likely own, because if you own vSphere, you own orchestrator. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so now, was there another question? Yes, sir.
How about the decrease of the
Great question. So the gentleman's question was, how about taking the resources down, right? So when I have actually idle VMs, those VMs that were sitting down here that are just soaking up CPU and memory but not actually utilizing that capacity. 10 minutes? Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you. So the answer is yes, you can automate those alerts as well. So those are type of part of the efficiency alerts. So remember, when you're looking at ops, right, you got health, which is focused on performance now. What's happening this second? Do I have a spike that's happening right now that's causing some alerts I need to look at? Then when you're in the risk is all about some of that contention and stress that's been ongoing that typically relates also to capacity, from a capacity overutilization, so you see that, but also you see some other risk there, like even compliance risk, vSphere, you know, compliance as well, risk in that area. But in the third column around efficiency, that's where you have opportunities to optimize the environment. That's where you get those workloads that are, you know, idle VMs, powered off VMs, you know, oversized VMs, where you can actually take those and actually now size them down. So we also have alerts for that as well. So you can actually automate those alerts. So we have alerts, for example, right, you know, that say, okay, this, you know, is an idle VM and it's been powered off. It's powered off 99% of the time. Again, based on your policy setting, whatever you define. And you can go in and say, sure, I'm comfortable with that alert, and automate it. So when we see those VMs, right, you can actually say, I want to automate this, or I want to, you know, reclaim this capacity. So there's some things that we can do here. You know, this machine is using, you know, 4 CPU, but, you know, we are recommending the right size it down to, you know, from 4 CPUs to 1 CPU, right? So we can actually automate that and have you size it down as well. Good. What you have to do is simply go into the policy and just say, I want to automate those specific alerts. Okay, so let's jump back momentarily to the slides and we'll come back. I wanted to show the custom profiles actually really quickly. If I go back here, let me just go to analysis, just so you guys get a quick visual of this. So if I go to capacity remaining here, right, so when you're looking at this, you're going to see the 4 different chiclets that are going to come up here that I talked about, you know, those little, you know, boxes, the little blocks, average, large, medium, small. Well, look at this. I have a plus sign right here, so I can go in and create my own profile right here on the object itself, or I can go into the content if I need to create multiple profiles and I need to create those profiles and assign them to different policies as well. I would go into content and create them. But very quickly, you simply, you know, click on the plus sign. I can create my own profile sizes here, and I can specify, you know, what policy, or if this is going to be enabled for all the policies in my object, in my environment. So again, very easily you can create these custom profiles that we touched on there as well. Okay, let's switch back and we'll come back hopefully if we have a little bit more time. All right, so we talked about the move as well. We showed the workload balance. So a couple of things we need to talk about is dashboards and widgets. So for those of you who actually have been leveraging Operations Manager, we give you a number of out-of-the-box dashboards. Right, for vSphere and for the environment. We give you a number of widgets that are out there that you can actually leverage as well. But you have the ability to create and customize your own. So a lot of customers said to us, hey, we want to be able to do more, you know, fancy things in dashboards. We want to be able to move, you know, widgets around and do different type of, you know, fancy things. You know, so what we've done is we've actually improved the widgets. We have different, you know, and new types of widgets that you can leverage and have those as part of your dashboards. So we've actually enhanced that capabilities. Now, taking that to the next level, a lot of customers said, well, from a reporting perspective, when we generated reports previously, you had to go in and select the views that you want to report on. But a lot of customers said to us, well, we've customized these dashboards, and we really like the dashboards you've given us. Why can't I report on them? Why do I have to go in and say, I want this widget and I want that? And we're like, that makes sense. That'll make it easier for you, right? So now you can just simply say, take this dashboard, report on it, this dashboard, and generate the report. And now also one of the things that a lot of customers have asked us, well, we don't want it just an email, but why can't we put it on a share? So now we actually can take those reports, put them on a network share somewhere, and everybody can get access to them, in addition to still being able to email them as a PDF or a CSV as well. Okay, so we can still do that, but we've just enhanced, that functionality. So a lot of great improvements there. We've made improvements in the architecture and scalability of Operations Manager. So if you're one of those clients that has a very large environment, a lot of remote data centers as well, you'll be excited about this because one, I like to say the theme here is bigger, better, faster. So some of these features, if you will, are transparent to a lot of our clients, but we took the 8-node cluster and we've actually doubled it in size. We can actually go up to 16 nodes now. So you can have a VROps cluster that is 16 nodes. We could go from 60,000 objects to 120,000 objects in your cluster. Now, you want more details around all these numbers? The documentation has it, but the best place to go is kb.vmware.com because we actually have an article. For every version of Operations Manager we've released, we have a KB article with details where we summarize all the details for you, and we have a spreadsheet which is a calculator. So you can download that spreadsheet and say, we have this many VMs, this many hosts, this is what our environment is, and then it recommends the appropriate sizing for you. Okay, 5. Okay, excellent, thank you. So we have that for you. So kb.vmware.com, just look for Operations Manager 6.1 sizing, and you'll be able to get that detailed information on scalability. Now, another thing is something called remote collectors. So a lot of customers also have like remote sites with, slow WAN links, and they're like, okay, well, how do we address that? We have this feature called remote collectors where we can offload that data collection onto these remote collectors, and then the remote collector will encrypt it and securely send it back to the VROps cluster. But what happened if there was a failure on the remote collector? Then we weren't able to bring that data in. So we had a failure on the collector. We're losing that data. So what we've done now is we created something called remote collector groups. So it allows you to say, we wanted to build resiliency and availability around the remote collector infrastructure. So now you can create a remote collector group and add remote collector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 within that collector group. So if I'm collecting from a vCenter server out there and this remote collector dies, because I have 4 other remote collectors in this group, that vCenter will simply start sending its data to one of the other collectors. So one of the other collectors will take on the responsibility of that data collection and still bring it in, so we don't lose any of that data. This is also important when you're doing things like third-party integration, as Himanshu talked about. So as you get into some of the higher editions and you're starting to leverage those management packs that are on VMware Solution Exchange, EMC storage, NetApp storage, Cisco UCS, HP, SiteScope, et cetera, all these different applications you want to bring in information in, remote collectors are a good option to collect that data and send it and bring it in. So you also offload some of that collection off the VROps cluster. Single sign-on. We didn't support single sign-on until this release. So 6.1, we actually now support single sign-on. You do have to be leveraging the vSphere 6 Platform Services Controller and single sign-on in vSphere 6, but we actually now support it. Before, we only supported local authentication as well as authentication over LDAP. So something like Active Directory authentication, we could do that over LDAP. We can do different open LDAP compliant directory authentication, but now we also support SSO, which is a great thing, and a lot of our customers are excited about that because they're really leveraging SSO. Now, the other thing is backup and restore. This really has not changed, but the one thing that has changed here, and hopefully this is exciting to some of you, and that is Site Recovery Manager now supports VROps as well. So you can have your protected site, and here's your backup site, and you can have VROps being protected leveraging SRM and vSphere replication as well. So this is, I think, a great addition here. Now, one of the things that we do as part of the 6.1 release, or we've implemented as part of 6.1, is everybody here would implement likely VROps in a different way. Everybody uses it in a slightly different way. While the themes are very similar, but you do things that are unique to your environment. And so initially, in this initial 6.1, we actually will capture, only if you allow us, if you turn this on, if you allow us to, we'll capture things like configuration data. What version are you running? What edition? What's the scale of your environment? What type of policies? But moving forward, post 6.1, what we're looking to do is actually start to capture things like latency. When you go to do a move, when you go to trigger an action, how long is that taking? What type of latency? How long is the UI taking to respond to you based on what you're asking it to do? Because that kind of information is going to help us improve and continue to enhance the Operations Manager platform as well. Thank you. Okay, so lastly, just some minor additional enhancements in the 6.1 release. Alerts. A lot of customers said, okay, we love these alerts, but we want to be able to add notes because we want to put in a ticket number, right? That's unique to us, or we want to put in some just notes on how we resolve this issue. Right, so now we actually can go in, add notes and whatnot into the alerts here. We added IPv6 support. We also support Windows 2000 R2 now. So as you know, we have a VA. So VROps Operations Manager is a virtual appliance, and that's the way we prefer you install it because it's the easiest for you and it's the easiest way for us to do updates on the OS and Operations Manager as well. But a lot of customers said, hey, we have our own Linux distribution. We have our own Windows distribution. So we actually have installable versions for Linux and installable versions for Windows. So customers have been asking for Windows 2000 R2 support. We actually now support it with 6.1. So you can install Operations Manager, the installable form factor for Windows, on 2012 R2. Now, upgrades. If anyone is going to be doing upgrades here, if you already have 5.8 and you need to upgrade to 6.1, if you need to migrate the data, then you have to go through a two-step process. You install 6, migrate the data, and then do an in-place upgrade. If you don't care about the data, just install 6.1, have them running side by side, and then just basically after a couple of months, shut down the 5.8 environment, and you're good to go. Okay? Some additional enhancements around custom alerting. So if anybody is leveraging custom alerts, you can actually create and modify and build your own alerts. So we've enhanced a lot of things here so that you can go in and get a lot more granular with alerts. So demo, we touched on the demo and we're already out of time. But I will be at the VN Solutions Exchange Lab. If any of you want to see some more stuff, please come see me in the next hour or so down at the Solution Exchange Lab. I'll be happy to show you some more stuff. Thank you very much. Himanshu, really quickly. Thank you.
The only other thing I want to call out is that, in terms of next steps, there is this ebook, Virtualization 2.0, that's available. So if you're taking pictures, great, and you'll have the URL there. But it's a really good, quick, dummies guide kind of a thing that's available to you. Also, if you want to try the product, there's a 60-day trial available on VMware.com. And also, if you don't want to do the whole installation thing, the HOL is available on site here as well, and as well on the VMware Cloud Lab as well. So you can try them out just in case you haven't not familiar with it yet.
And if you do have a moment, please fill out the survey for us. Give us some feedback, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.